Was something you'd said, was this, without giving too much away, Watercress is quite a bit about emotions and emotional states. And you said that as children were given little guidance as to the schedule or life cycle of our feelings and emotions, we're expected to learn the timetable of moods all on our own. If we're traumatized, and who isn't, we can be strengthened when we understand that dark moods may often return, but they will lift again. Watercress, through its lighthearted adventures, portrays this dawning realization in a young creature, and we're dealing with some fairly dark stuff. As you mentioned, we open with Papa's gone, and at one point, Cress tells a friend that she hates herself. Mama is also dealing with a bit of trauma. Obviously, I think she says that something about life not being fair, just taking it for a fact that just so you know, life's never fair. Okay, well, enjoy your day. Thanks, Mama. What was it about dealing with this state of childhood? How much of that did you know from? Because you mentioned that you wanna hit the target. So how much do you know that that's going to be the target going in? And then why are animals the way to approach that subject as opposed to humans?
Those are really good questions. And luckily, the first part of it is really easy to answer. Yes, I knew that was what the book was going to be about. Going into it, I knew that it was going to be about the cyclical nature of strong emotion. I knew that because that's why I wrote the book. I thought the idea first that children, my children in two, sort of are taught about moods, taught about anger and rage and disappointment and grief, but they're taught about it in such a way as to think this is something to endure and then you get over it. And they aren't necessarily taught that anger, grief, rage, disappointment, loneliness, fear are not, even if you survive them, they're not going to go away. They're actually part of what it is to be alive. They will come back. They will come back and you will survive them again. They get easier to survive the more experience you have with them. But when you're young, when you're really young, you know, when you're 2 years old and your parent goes out the door and goes to work, you don't know that they're ever going to come back again, and you grieve like they've died because you don't have the experience yet. You have to learn that experience of cyclicality, of the cycles of moods and of things. So I went into Watercress thinking, this is what it's about. I want to write a story in which a young character comes to understand that not only are feelings valid, but that they're not one-time experiences. They are recurrent experiences. And this is something that I think isn't much explained. Let's take Charlotte's Web. Charlotte, at the end of Charlotte's Web, spoiler alert for anybody who's never read it, Charlotte the spider passes away. She dies. And Wilbur is in terrible grief. Her best friend, her pig friend, is in terrible grief and mourning, but then he realizes that her egg sac has hatched, and he persuades 3 of her thousands of children to stay in the barn and be his friends, and he tells them all about their mother. Well, that's where the story ends, and it's a lovely ending to the story. But what E.B. White doesn't quite go on to say is that those spiders have very short lives too, and they will die too. But when one of them dies, Wilbur will be better equipped to deal with it because he has endured and survived the death of Charlotte. That's implied, but it's not said. And I wanted to write a book that said it. And that's part of why I wrote Watercress, and I think I said it successfully, and that's part of why I'm happy about it. So the second part of your question was about, but why animals? And I don't know, except that with animals, I feel I could be given the liberty and the license to make almost anything happen to them the way almost anything can happen in a fantasy. I mean, talking animals are a fantasy. Animals don't talk to each other. Squirrels and mice, and they might live near each other, but as far as I know, they don't have conversations and discuss, the price of beans. But in an animal fantasy, in an animal story, animals who have different experiences of life can talk to each other. And in a way, a squirrel talking to a rabbit, or a rabbit talking to a chinchilla, or a chinchilla talking back to the skunk who is wearing her, is also a metaphor for how different we all feel when we're young, and how we notice our differences as much as if we're different creatures, as if, I'm a squirrel and you're a wombat, I'm a wombat and you're a snake. We feel differences very strongly when we're a certain age. And only as we get older do we see that what is similar in us is much greater than what is different in us. But I think that's one of the attractions of writing animal fables, is that you can exaggerate the differences without having people fighting all the time.
So how do you go about deciding who's going to be what animal, or is it a decision? Do they come into your mind like the chinchilla and they just are that animal, and you have to deal with them as they are?
Pretty much, it's like I put on that movie. I'm back in that movie theater in the Adirondacks when I was in high school. I put on the reel, and then I set the machine going, and then I sit in the back row with my notebook and take notes. I didn't really know what's going to happen much. I just know that the reel said the emotional life of children, and I put it on, and I get a difficult moment going in the beginning of the story, and then I just watch and write down what I see happening, and so I don't make a decision. I will say that there's one character, the bear who loves honey, and his name is Tunk, T-U-N-K. And the reason his name is Tunk, this is one of the few things that is related to my real life, is that when one of my children was small, he once said the word tunk. He just said it, tunk. And I loved the sound of it. And I thought, how come that's not a sound in the English language? Tunk, tunk. It's like throwing a stone in a pond. Tunk, tunk. I just loved it. And so I started to say it all the time. He never said it again. He said it precisely once. And I couldn't make it into a family word, no matter how many times I would say, "Hey, Tunk, let's go to the store." I couldn't make him embrace it or ever say it again. So finally, he's now 24. Finally, when I was writing Cresswater Cress, I thought, I've got to bring Tunk into the language. I've been living with it for 20 years. I want other people to be able to say Tunk.